A sterile millionaire accustomed to moving empires harbors an emptiness that no power can fill. On a cold night, he spots an orphan girl, barefoot and rejected even by passers-by. The silence of the street is broken when he approaches her and makes an unexpected proposal. "You need a dad and I need an heiress." Her response leaves him in shock. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. William Bill Harrison stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, overlooking the glittering skyline that had witnessed his meteoric rise to power. At 53, Bill was the embodiment of the American dream, the self-made billionaire who had transformed a small tech startup into Harrison Enterprises, a global conglomerate valued at over $30 billion. The financial papers called him the Oracle of Wall Street, a man who could move markets with a single word. But tonight, as the December snow fell silently over New York City, Bill's mind was not on acquisition deals or stock prices. His gaze was fixed on his own reflection in the glass, the silver at his temples, the deep lines etched around his eyes, not just from age but from a grief that money could never heal. 20 stories below, Christmas shoppers hurried along Fifth Avenue, families together, parents holding children's hands. Bill's fingers instinctively reached for the gold locket he always carried in his pocket, opening it to reveal the photo of a smiling little girl with his eyes, Emma, his daughter, taken by an undetected heart condition 8 years ago. The second wound he carried was known only to him and his wife of 15 years, Rebecca. His inability to father another child due to infertility, discovered too late. "Mr. Harrison." His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your car is waiting downstairs." Bill slipped the locket back into his pocket. "Thank you, Jenny. I'll be right down." The Harrison Towers private elevator whisked him down to the lobby, where Frank, his driver of 12 years, waited with an umbrella. "Evening, Mr. Harrison. The charity gala at the plaza?" "Yes, Frank. Though I'm not in the mood for champagne and small talk tonight." Frank nodded knowingly. December was always difficult for his employer. The anniversary of Emma's passing loomed near. "I understand, sir. We can cut it short if you'd like." In the back seat of the Bentley, Bill scrolled through emails on his phone, only half seeing them. His marriage to Rebecca, once built on genuine love, had deteriorated into a cold arrangement of convenience. She had become obsessed with maintaining their social status, transforming into someone he barely recognized. A woman who hosted perfect dinner parties but hadn't truly looked him in the eyes for years. The car rolled through the glittering canyons of Manhattan, past luxury storefronts with elaborate Christmas displays. As they approached a red light near Madison Avenue, Bill's attention was drawn to a commotion outside an exclusive boutique. "You can't be here, kid. You're scaring away customers." A store security guard was shooing away a small figure huddled in the doorway, seeking shelter from the biting cold. Bill leaned forward. "Frank, slow down a bit." Through the falling snow, he could now clearly see a little girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, wearing nothing but a thin jacket several sizes too large, torn jeans, and sneakers held together with duct tape. Her face was smudged with dirt, her blonde hair matted and unwashed. She clutched a small battered backpack to her chest like a shield. "Please, sir." Her voice carried faintly through the car window. "I just need to stay warm for a little while." "I told you to beat it." The guard's voice was harsh. "This is Fifth Avenue, not a homeless shelter." The light turned green, but Bill found himself unable to look away. "Frank, pull over." "Sir?" "Just pull over, please." Before he fully understood what he was doing, Bill was out of the car, the snow immediately coating his custom Italian suit. The security guard straightened up when he recognized one of the city's wealthiest men. "Mr. Harrison, sorry about this disturbance. I was just removing this." Bill raised his hand, silencing him. "That won't be necessary." He approached the girl slowly, kneeling despite the wet sidewalk. Up close, he could see her blue eyes wide with fear and distrust, her small body shivering uncontrollably. Something about her gaze reminded him painfully of Emma. "Hello there," he said softly. "I'm Bill." The girl regarded him warily. "I'm Sophie," she finally whispered. "You look cold, Sophie. Where are your parents?" She hugged her backpack tighter. "Don't have any. Foster home's bad. I ran." Her simple words hit Bill like a physical blow. In his world of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, children like Sophie were statistics in charity reports. not flesh and blood reality on his doorstep. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Sophie shrugged. "Yesterday, maybe." Without hesitation, Bill removed his cashmere overcoat and wrapped it around her tiny shoulders. It engulfed her completely, making her look even smaller. "Would you like a warm meal, Sophie? I know a place nearby." Suspicion flashed in her eyes. "I don't go with strangers." Bill felt a grudging admiration for her caution. "That's very smart. Look, Frank is my driver." He pointed to the Bentley where Frank stood watching with concern. "We could sit in the warm car, doors open, and I can have food brought to us. How does that sound?" Sophie considered this, her survival instincts battling her desperate situation. Finally, hunger won out. "Okay." In the car with the heat blasting, Bill called his assistant to bring hot chocolate and food from the deli across the street. As Sophie cautiously sipped the warm drink that arrived minutes later, Bill made another call to Sarah Pearson, his company's head legal counsel. "Sarah, I need information on emergency foster placement tonight." While Sophie devoured a sandwich, Bill learned from her fragmented story that she had been in the system for 3 years, bounced between 5 foster homes, the last of which had been neglectful to the point of abuse. She had run away 2 weeks ago and had been surviving on the streets since then. Something stirred in Bill, something he thought had died with Emma. A protective instinct, a desperate need to make right at least this one small corner of a broken world. "Sophie," he said gently, "would you like to come stay at my home tonight? It's warm and there's plenty of food, just for tonight while we figure things out." She studied him with eyes too old for her young face. "Why would you do that?" The question struck him to his core. Why indeed? Was it guilt, charity, or something deeper he couldn't yet name? "Because," Bill said, finding truth in the words as he spoke them, "everyone deserves a safe place to sleep." Sophie didn't answer immediately. She looked out at the falling snow, then back at Bill. "Now, will there be a real bed?" The simple question nearly broke him. "Yes, Sophie, a real bed." What happened next surprised them both. Sophie reached out her small hand and placed it hesitantly on Bill's. "Okay." As Frank drove them toward the Harrison Tower, Bill sent a text to Rebecca. "Coming home with a guest, a child who needs help. Please prepare the blue guest room." Rebecca's reply was immediate and predictable. "What are you thinking? We have the Vandermiltons' dinner tomorrow. Cancel whatever this is." Bill put his phone away without responding, knowing the battle that awaited him. But looking at Sophie, now asleep against the door with his coat still wrapped around her, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: purpose. Frank caught his eye in the rearview mirror. "Everything all right, Mr. Harrison?" Bill watched the gentle rise and fall of Sophie's breathing, her small hand still clutching her backpack even in sleep. "No, Frank," he answered quietly, "but maybe it will be." As the Bentley glided through the snowy streets of Manhattan, Bill Harrison, the man who had everything and nothing, found himself speaking words he never thought he'd say again. "I think I'm bringing a child home." The Harrison penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of the gleaming tower that bore the family name, a carefully curated showcase of wealth and taste. Rebecca Harrison had personally overseen every detail of the 12,000 square foot space, from the Italian marble floors to the museum-quality art collection. It was designed to impress, not to comfort, a stage set for the society events she hosted, rather than a home meant to nurture. When the private elevator doors opened, Rebecca was waiting, arms crossed over her designer silk pajamas. At 47, she remained strikingly beautiful, her blonde hair perfectly highlighted, her slim figure maintained by rigorous workout routines and the best nutritionists in Manhattan. But her eyes were cold as they fixed first on Bill, then on the small figure beside him. "What is this?" she demanded, not bothering to lower her voice. Sophie shrank back against Bill's side, fingers tightening around his. "Rebecca, this is Sophie," Bill said evenly. "Sophie, this is my wife, Mrs. Harrison." Rebecca's perfectly lined lips pressed into a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "William," a word. In private, in the study with the door closed, Rebecca's composure shattered. "Have you lost your mind? Bringing a street child into our home? Do you have any idea what diseases she might be carrying? What about our reputation? What if she steals something?" Bill had anticipated this reaction, had rehearsed his response during the elevator ride up, but still found himself struggling to contain his anger. She's 8 years old, Rebecca, and she has nowhere to go. That's what social services are for. You can write them a check if you're feeling charitable. I've already called Sarah. She's working on emergency placement papers. Sophie stays tonight, at least. Rebecca's carefully maintained facade cracked. This is about Emma, isn't it? You see some street urchin and suddenly you're trying to replace our daughter. The accusation hit Bill like a physical blow. Don't you dare bring Emma into this, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. This child needs help. That's all there is to it. And what happens tomorrow and the next day? You can't save every stray that crosses your path, William. One night, Rebecca, that's all I'm asking. She studied him, recognizing the resolve in his eyes, the same determination that had built his empire. Fine, one night. But she stays in the guest wing, and Martha supervises her bathing. God knows what's living in that hair. When they returned to the foyer, they found Sophie standing exactly where they'd left her, still clutching her backpack, eyes darting nervously around the opulent space, as if afraid to touch anything. Martha, the Harrisons' housekeeper of 20 years, had appeared and was regarding the child with a mixture of concern and compassion. At 65, Martha had been with the family since before Emma was born, and she alone had witnessed Bill's transformation from an engaged father to the hollow man he'd become. "Martha," Bill said, "could you please help Sophie get cleaned up and find her something to eat, and prepare the blue guest room?" "Of course, Mr. Harrison." Martha extended her hand to the girl. "Come along, dear. Let's get you a nice warm bath." Sophie looked to Bill for reassurance. "It's okay," he said gently. "Martha takes care of everyone here. You can trust her." Sophie nodded hesitantly and took Martha's offered hand. "And Sophie," Bill added, "you're safe here. I promise." As Martha led the girl away, Rebecca turned to Bill. "I've cancelled my meetings tomorrow. I'll contact our family attorney first thing in the morning to sort this out properly." Bill knew what she really meant, to find a way to remove Sophie from their home with minimal publicity and maximum speed. But for tonight, at least, the child would be safe and warm. Later, unable to sleep, Bill found himself wandering to the guest wing. Outside Sophie's door, he heard Martha's gentle voice reading a story. He paused, listening to the familiar words of Goodnight Moon, Emma's favorite bedtime book. When Martha emerged, she startled at finding Bill in the hallway. "Mr. Harrison, I was just helping her settle in. The poor thing was exhausted but afraid to sleep." "How is she?" Martha's kind face softened. "Cleaner now. I had to throw away most of her clothes. Nothing salvageable. She was hiding food in her pockets at dinner. Signs of a child who's gone hungry too many times." She hesitated. "She has bruises, sir, on her back and arms. Not accidental ones." Bill felt a surge of protective anger. "Did she say anything about it?" "No, sir. But she flinched when I raised my hand to brush her hair. Says volumes, doesn't it?" Bill nodded grimly. "Thank you, Martha. You should get some rest." "Sir," Martha said carefully, "it's good to see you caring again. Whatever Mrs. Harrison says." After Martha left, Bill stood outside Sophie's door for a long moment before quietly turning the handle. The room was dimly lit by a small nightlight. Sophie was a tiny lump under the plush comforter, only the top of her freshly washed hair visible. On the nightstand sat her backpack, still within reaching distance. Bill was about to leave when Sophie stirred and turned over. "Mr. Bill," she whispered, using the name she'd decided on during the car ride. "I thought you were asleep," he said softly. "This bed is too soft." "I'm not used to it," Bill smiled faintly. "I understand. It takes time to get used to new things." Sophie sat up, the oversized t-shirt Martha had found for her slipping off one shoulder. "Your wife doesn't like me." The blunt observation caught Bill off guard. "Mrs. Harrison, she just needs time to get to know you." Sophie considered this with a seriousness that seemed beyond her years. "She doesn't like you much either, does she?" Bill couldn't help the short laugh that escaped him. "What makes you say that?" "She looks at you like my last foster mom looked at her husband, like she's angry all the time." Out of the mouths of babes, Bill thought. "It's complicated, Sophie." She nodded sagely. "Grown-up stuff always is." "You should try to sleep now," Bill said, moving toward the door. "Mr. Bill?" Sophie's voice stopped him. "Are you going to send me back tomorrow?" The question hung in the air between them. The rational answer, the one Rebecca would insist upon, was yes, but looking at this small, wounded child, who had already endured more suffering than most adults, Bill found himself unable to voice that answer. "Let's not worry about tomorrow just yet," he said instead. Sophie seemed to accept this non-answer. She nestled back down into the pillows. "This is the nicest place I've ever stayed," she murmured sleepily. Long after Sophie had fallen asleep, Bill remained at her doorway, watching the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. In the quiet of the night, an impossible thought began to form in his mind, a thought that would have seemed absurd just 24 hours earlier. What if she stayed? Not just for a night or a week, but permanently. The legal hurdles would be enormous. Rebecca would fight him every step of the way. His board of directors would question his stability. But looking at Sophie's peaceful face, for the first time since losing Emma, Bill felt the frozen chambers of his heart begin to thaw. Morning arrived with the soft glow of winter sunlight filtering through the penthouse windows. Bill, who had barely slept, was already at the kitchen island with his laptop when Martha arrived to prepare breakfast. "I've been researching emergency foster care," he told her. "Sarah's coming by at 9 to discuss options." Martha nodded, hiding her surprise at seeing her employer in the kitchen before dawn, a room he typically only passed through. "And Mrs. Harrison?" "Still asleep, I imagine. And the little one?" As if summoned by the question, Sophie appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, wearing the same oversized t-shirt from the night before. She hesitated, clearly unsure of her welcome in this space. "Good morning, Sophie," Bill said warmly. "Are you hungry?" She nodded, eyes wide as she took in the gleaming professional kitchen. "Martha makes the best pancakes in New York," Bill told her. "Don't you, Martha?" The housekeeper smiled. "Blueberry or chocolate chip?" "Both?" Sophie asked tentatively, as if expecting to be scolded for her audacity. Bill laughed, a genuine sound that hadn't been heard in the Harrison home for years. "Both it is." As Sophie climbed onto a stool at the counter, Bill felt a certainty crystallizing within him. This child belonged here, with him. The how of it he didn't yet know, but the why was sitting right in front of him, cautiously smiling as Martha set a glass of orange juice before her. In that moment, William Harrison, master of the universe, made a silent vow to the small girl in his kitchen. "You will never be hungry or afraid again. Not while I have breath in my body." Sarah Pearson arrived precisely at 9, her sleek briefcase and impeccable pantsuit reflecting her reputation as one of New York's most formidable corporate attorneys. At 42, she had built her career defending Harrison Enterprises from hostile takeovers and regulatory challenges. But the situation Bill described over the phone had caught her off guard. "Emergency foster placement is complicated, Bill," she explained as they sat in his home office. "Especially for someone with your profile. There will be intense scrutiny." Bill nodded. "I understand that, but I want to do this properly, Sarah. I want to give Sophie a permanent home." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "You're talking about adoption? Bill, you've known this child for less than 24 hours. Sometimes you just know." His voice was quiet but determined. Sarah studied her client carefully. In 15 years of representing Bill Harrison, she had never seen him act impulsively. His business decisions were calculated, strategic, often 3 moves ahead of his competitors. This was different. There was an emotional quality to his determination that both surprised and concerned her. "Rebecca is on board with this?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "She will be," Bill replied, not meeting her eyes. Sarah sighed. "Bill, I need to be blunt. The courts won't place a child in a home with marital discord, and your history after Emma, there will be questions about your motivations." "My motivations?" Bill's eyes hardened. "A child needed help. I helped. It's that simple." "Nothing about this is simple," Sarah countered. "Child services will investigate thoroughly. They'll want to know why a billionaire suddenly wants to take in a foster child. They'll consider if you're emotionally stable enough after your loss. And let's be honest, your marriage to Rebecca isn't exactly the picture of domestic harmony." Bill was about to respond when the door opened and Sophie peeked in, now dressed in clothes Martha had purchased online with overnight delivery, jeans and a purple sweater that actually fit her small frame. "Mr. Bill," she said hesitantly, "Martha said to tell you she's taking me to the sunroom to see the fish." Bill's expression immediately softened. "That sounds fun. Sophie, This is my friend Ms. Pearson. She's a lawyer who helps people with important paperwork. Sophie regarded Sarah with the wariness of a child who had learned to be suspicious of authority figures. Are you here to send me away? Sarah was taken aback by the directness of the question. Before she could formulate a response, Bill spoke. No one is sending you anywhere you don't want to go, he assured Sophie. Ms. Pearson is helping me figure out how you can stay here if that's what you'd like. Sophie's eyes widened. Stay here, like forever? The hope in her voice was unmistakable, and Sarah watched as something transformed in Bill's face, a determination that told her he would move heaven and earth for this child he barely knew. If that's what you want, Bill said gently. Sophie didn't smile. Sarah noted that the child seemed to hold her emotions carefully in check, but her posture relaxed slightly. Martha's waiting, she said, and with a last curious glance at Sarah, she disappeared back through the door. Sarah waited until she was sure Sophie was out of earshot. Bill, I need to ask, is this about Emma? The question hung in the air between them. Bill's jaw tightened, but he didn't immediately dismiss it. Emma is gone, he said finally. I know that. Sophie isn't a replacement. She's a child who needs someone to care for her, and I find that I want to be that person. Sarah nodded, making notes on her legal pad. I'll contact family court today and start the process for temporary guardianship. It's the first step. But Bill, you need to prepare Rebecca. Her cooperation will be essential. As if summoned by her name, Rebecca appeared in the doorway. Her hair was perfectly styled, her casual weekend attire still managing to look runway ready. Prepare me for what? She asked coolly. Sarah recognized her cue to leave. I'll get those papers started. Call me after you two have talked. Alone with his wife, Bill braced himself for the confrontation he'd been avoiding. You can't be serious about keeping that child, Rebecca said without preamble. Her name is Sophie. I don't care what her name is. You can't bring a strange child into our home and expect me to play mommy. I'm calling Dr. Winters. Clearly you're having some kind of breakdown. Bill's patience, already thin, snapped. This isn't about you, Rebecca. For once in our marriage, this is about something more important than your social calendar or what the board members' wives will think. How dare you, she hissed. I've dedicated my life to supporting your career, maintaining the perfect home, being the perfect corporate wife. I've done everything expected of me. Except be a partner, Bill countered. Except stand by me when Emma... Don't! Rebecca's voice cracked. Don't you dare use her against me. I lost her too. And then you shut down. We both did. We've been living like ghosts in this mausoleum you call a home. Rebecca's composure slipped further. And you think some random street urchin will fix that? Fix us. This isn't about fixing us, Bill said quietly. I think we both know we're past that point. This is about Sophie. She deserves a chance, Rebecca, a real home. And you think you can provide that? The man who spends 80 hours a week at the office? Who missed half of Emma's recitals because the deal couldn't wait? The accusation struck home, but Bill refused to be deterred. I've changed. I'm changing. Sophie deserves a family. And I need a reason to come home at night. Rebecca stared at him, seeing something in his expression that made her take a step back. You're really serious about this? Yes. She shook her head slowly. The board will never stand for it. You think Montgomery won't use this against you? He's been looking for any sign of weakness to justify pushing you out. Richard Montgomery, Bill's cousin and the company's CFO, had made no secret of his ambition to take control of Harrison Enterprises. As the son of Bill's uncle and company co-founder, Richard felt entitled to the CEO position and had been carefully building alliances on the board. Let Richard try, Bill said dismissively. The company's stock has tripled under my leadership. This isn't about stock prices, it's about perception. The great William Harrison, undone by grief, making irrational decisions, taking in strays because he couldn't protect his own daughter. Bill flinched as if she'd slapped him. That's enough, Rebecca. No, it's not nearly enough. If you do this, if you insist on this adoption charade, you're doing it alone. Her voice was ice. I won't be part of it. Bill met her gaze steadily. I'm sorry you feel that way. Rebecca studied him with narrowed eyes. You'd really choose this child over our marriage? Over everything we've built? Our marriage has been over for years, Rebecca. We both know that. We've just been too cowardly to admit it. She recoiled slightly at the brutal honesty. "The prenup won't be favorable to you if I file citing mental instability." Bill almost laughed at the transparent threat. "File for whatever reason you want. Half of everything I have is still more than anyone could spend in 10 lifetimes. Their standoff was interrupted by the sound of the elevator doors opening in the foyer, followed by an unwelcome voice. "Hello? Bill? Rebecca, where's everyone hiding?" Richard Montgomery strode into the study without waiting for an invitation. His tailored weekend casual wear and carefully maintained salt and pepper hair projecting the image of effortless prosperity. At 50, Richard had the lean physique of a man who considered fitness another arena for competition. "Richard," Bill acknowledged coldly, "this isn't a good time." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Is it ever?" Rebecca called, concerned about you. "Something about a house guest?" Bill shot Rebecca a look of betrayal, which she met with defiant calm. "My husband is experiencing a lapse in judgment," she told Richard. "I thought perhaps you could talk some sense into him." Richard's predatory interest was now fully engaged. "A lapse in judgment? That doesn't sound like the calculating Bill Harrison I know. What's going on, cousin?" Before Bill could respond, Martha appeared at the door, her usually placid expression tense. "Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Sophie is asking for you. She seems upset." Bill immediately moved toward the door, but Richard blocked his path. "Sophie? Who's Sophie?" His gaze darted between Bill and Rebecca, sensing opportunity in the obvious tension. "None of your concern, Richard," Bill said firmly. "Actually, as CFO and board member of Harrison Enterprises, anything affecting the company's leadership is very much my concern." Richard's tone was smooth, but his meaning clear, a threat wrapped in corporate protocol. At that moment, Sophie appeared behind Martha, her small face pale. When she saw the room full of adults, she shrank back. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I had a bad dream." Richard turned, taking in the sight of the obviously underprivileged child standing in the doorway of the Harrison penthouse. His expression shifted from confusion to calculation to barely concealed delight. "Well, well," he said softly. "What have we here?" Bill moved past Richard, ignoring him completely, and knelt before Sophie. "It's okay. Dreams can't hurt you." "It was the closet again," Sophie whispered. "They were locking me in the dark." Bill felt a surge of protective rage at whoever had traumatized this child so deeply. "No one will ever lock you in anywhere again, I promise." Behind him, he could hear Richard's low whistle. "Fascinating development, Bill. The board will certainly want to hear about your new project." Bill rose to his full height, turning to face his cousin with cold fury. "Sophie is not a project. She's a child who deserves safety and care." Richard raised his hands in mock surrender, but his eyes glittered with malicious triumph. Of course, very charitable of you. Though I wonder what Child Protective Services would make of you taking in a minor without proper clearances or procedures." "Get out," Bill said quietly. Richard smiled. "We'll talk soon, cousin." "Rebecca, always a pleasure." After Richard left, the three of them stood in tense silence until Sophie's small voice broke it. "I made trouble for you," she said, her eyes downcast. "I'm sorry." Bill knelt again to her level. "You haven't done anything wrong, Sophie. Sometimes adults just disagree about things." Sophie looked unconvinced. "The man with the fancy watch doesn't like me." "Richard doesn't like anyone except himself," Bill said, which earned him a tiny smile from Sophie. Rebecca watched this interaction with a complex expression before turning away. "I'm going out. Don't wait up." As she left, Sophie looked at Bill with those too wise eyes. "She's really mad," Bill sighed. "Yes, she is." "Because of me?" "No," Bill said firmly. "Because sometimes people grow in different directions, like trees reaching for sunlight. It's not your fault." Sophie seemed to consider this. "My last foster mom said I was bad luck, that I broke things just by being there." "That's not true," Bill said, his heart breaking for the psychological wounds this child had endured. "You're not bad luck, Sophie. In fact, I think you might be exactly what this house needs." Later, as Bill tucked Sophie into bed for her afternoon nap, he realized that Richard's unexpected visit had forced his hand. The battle lines were now clearly drawn, with Rebecca and Richard on one side, and him and Sophie on the other. What had begun as a spontaneous act of kindness was rapidly evolving into something far more significant, a reckoning that would either destroy everything he had built or finally give it meaning. The following Monday morning found Bill in his corner office at Harrison Tower, reviewing the guardianship papers Sarah had prepared over the weekend. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. The empire he had built spread before him like a concrete kingdom. But today his mind was elsewhere, on the small girl who had spent the weekend exploring his penthouse with growing confidence, who had fallen asleep against his side while they watched animated movies, who had asked hesitant questions about whether she might be allowed to stay for a little while longer. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Harrison, the board has called an emergency meeting for 2 o'clock this afternoon." Bill wasn't surprised. Richard worked quickly. "Thank you, Jenny. Please clear my schedule." A soft knock at his door made him look up. Michael Jenkins, a social worker from Child Protective Services, stood in the doorway. In his early 30s, with earnest eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a messenger bag slung over his shoulder, Jenkins looked more like a graduate student than a government official. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Michael Jenkins from CPS. We had an appointment?" Bill rose and extended his hand. "Of course, Mr. Jenkins. Please come in." As they sat in the seating area of Bill's office, Jenkins removed a tablet from his bag. "Mr. Harrison, I want to be transparent. We received a concerning call about a child potentially being harbored in your home without proper authorization." "Harbored?" Bill raised an eyebrow. "That's an interesting choice of words for providing emergency shelter to a child in need." Jenkins had the grace to look embarrassed. "Not my terminology, sir, but the fact remains, taking in a minor without going through proper channels raises serious concerns. Sophie was living on the streets, Mr. Jenkins. She had run away from an abusive foster placement. Should I have left her there to freeze?" "Of course not." Jenkins adjusted his glasses. "But the proper procedure would have been to contact authorities immediately. Which I did through my attorney. Sarah Pearson has been in contact with family court since Saturday morning." Bill slid a folder across the table. "These are the emergency guardianship papers we've filed. We are doing everything by the book now." Jenkins reviewed the documents, his expression professional but his eyes betraying surprise at the thoroughness of the paperwork. "You're seeking permanent guardianship? Mr. Harrison, that's a lengthy process, especially for someone in your position." "My position?" "High-profile individuals face additional scrutiny in adoption cases. The courts want to ensure the child isn't being taken in for problematic reasons." Bill leaned forward. "Let me be clear, Mr. Jenkins. Sophie needs a stable home. I can provide that. My motivations are that simple." Jenkins nodded, though he looked unconvinced. "I'll need to interview Sophie and your wife and inspect your home environment. Of course, though I should mention that my wife and I are reassessing our marriage at the moment." Jenkins made a note on his tablet. "Marital instability is a significant concern in placement decisions, Mr. Harrison." Bill felt a flare of irritation. "Is it better for a child to be in an unstable home or no home at all? Sophie was sleeping in doorways last week." "It's not that simple." "It is that simple," Bill interrupted. "A child needs safety, stability, and love. I can provide the first two immediately, and the third, well, that's already happening, whether it fits your checklist or not." Jenkins studied Bill with new interest. "You care about her, already. Is that so surprising?" "In my experience, Mr. Harrison, people like you, people like me, the wealthy, the powerful, children are often accessories, status symbols, another achievement to be acquired." Bill felt his anger rising but forced himself to remain calm. "I understand your skepticism, Mr. Jenkins, I really do. But I'd appreciate if you judge me based on my actions, not my tax bracket." Jenkins had the decency to look chastened. "Fair enough. When can I meet Sophie?" "This evening. I'll take you to my home after we're finished here." As they continued discussing the requirements for guardianship, Bill's mind drifted to the board meeting ahead. Richard would have already been working the phones, sowing seeds of doubt about Bill's stability and judgment. The battle for Harrison Enterprises was about to begin in earnest, with Sophie unwittingly at the center. Across town, in a trendy Soho cafe, Jessica Carter was staring at her laptop screen, cursor blinking accusingly on a blank document. At 34, Jessica had built a reputation as one of New York's most tenacious investigative journalists, known for exposing corporate malfeasance and political corruption. But today, her usual focus was shattered by an unexpected message from Richard Montgomery. Exclusive story opportunity. Harrison Enterprises CEO William Harrison suffering mental breakdown, taking in street children. Potential corporate takeover implications. Substantial compensation for the right angle. Lunch to discuss? Jessica reread the message for the 5th time, her journalistic instincts on high alert. A story about William Harrison would be major. The reclusive billionaire rarely gave interviews and had become even more private after his daughter's tragic passing years ago. But the tone of Montgomery's message raised red flags. The right angle implied he wanted a hit piece, not objective reporting. Her editor would salivate over this story. Harrison was the white whale of business profiles, brilliant, innovative, and notoriously private. But Jessica had built her career on integrity, not character assassination. Her phone buzzed with another message from Montgomery. Lunch confirmed at Le Bernardin 1 p.m. discussing Harrison expose, $50K advance offered. Jessica's eyebrows shot up. $50,000 just for lunch? Montgomery was desperate for this story to run, which meant there was more to it than a simple corporate power play. She did a quick search for recent news on William Harrison and found nothing unusual. Harrison Enterprises stock was performing well, their latest product launch had been successful, and the company's reputation remained strong. So why was Montgomery so eager to paint Harrison as unstable? Jessica made her decision. She would meet Montgomery, hear him out, and then do what she always did: find the real story wherever it led. At 1 o'clock sharp, Jessica walked into Le Bernardin, where Richard Montgomery was already waiting at a secluded corner table. His smile was practiced, his handshake firm but not aggressive, a man who had studied the social signals of power. Ms. Carter, thank you for coming. I have admired your work for years. The expose on pharmaceutical price fixing was masterful. Jessica returned his smile without warmth. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Though I'm curious why Harrison Enterprises CFO is reaching out to me rather than the company's PR team. Montgomery chuckled. Direct, I appreciate that. He leaned forward. What I'm about to share with you isn't an official company matter. It's a personal concern about my cousin's well-being, and by extension, the future of Harrison Enterprises. Your cousin being William Harrison. Exactly. Bill has always been intensely focused, brilliant but rigid. After Emma's passing, he became even more withdrawn, but recently his behavior has become erratic. Jessica took notes, her expression neutral. Define erratic. 3 days ago, he brought a homeless child into his home. No background checks, no proper procedures. Just picked her up off the street on impulse. This from a man who typically deliberates for weeks before acquiring a new company. Maybe he was just being compassionate. Montgomery's smile tightened. Bill doesn't do compassion. He does strategy. This sudden interest in playing savior is concerning, especially given his history. His history? Bill couldn't protect his own daughter. Now he's fixating on this street child as some kind of redemption. It's classic displacement behavior. Our board is deeply concerned. Jessica studied Montgomery carefully. And you're sharing this out of concern for your cousin. For Bill, for the company, and for our shareholders. Montgomery slid a USB drive across the table. Financial reports from the last quarter. Evidence of decisions that, in retrospect, show increasingly questionable judgment. Nothing illegal, but concerning patterns. Jessica didn't touch the drive. And the $50,000? That's for what exactly? Consider it an advance for exclusive access. I can arrange interviews with board members, provide internal documents, give you the inside perspective no other journalist has. All I ask is that you follow the story where it leads, which you believe leads to William Harrison being mentally unfit to run his company. Montgomery spread his hands. I'm simply providing information. Your journalistic integrity will determine the story. Jessica finally picked up the drive. I'll look into it, but Mr. Montgomery, I follow stories, not narratives. If there's nothing there, I won't manufacture it. His smile never faltered. Of course, that's why I came to you, Ms. Carter. Your reputation for truth is unimpeachable. As Jessica left the restaurant, she knew Montgomery was playing her. The question was why. And what was really happening with William Harrison and this mysterious child? Back at Harrison Tower, the boardroom was tense as Bill took his seat at the head of the table. 12 board members were present, many of whom had been with the company since its early days. Bill had known some of these men and women for decades, had celebrated victories and weathered crises alongside them. Today, however, he could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the wary glances, the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered. Richard sat opposite him, radiating false concern. "Bill, thank you for joining us on such short notice. We've called this meeting because several board members have expressed concerns about recent developments." Bill kept his expression neutral. "I assume you're referring to my decision to seek guardianship of Sophie Wells." Murmurs circulated around the table. Clearly, Richard had already briefed them. Elaine Donovan, one of the longest-serving board members, spoke up. "Bill, we're concerned about the impulsiveness of this decision. It seems uncharacteristic." "Is compassion uncharacteristic, Elaine?" Bill asked quietly. "Of course not," she replied, flustered. "But taking in a child off the street without proper vetting or procedures, it raises questions about your current state of mind." Bill looked around the table, meeting each person's gaze directly. "Let me be clear. I encountered a child in desperate circumstances. I provided emergency assistance. I immediately engaged legal counsel to ensure all proper procedures are followed. There was nothing impulsive about it." Richard cleared his throat. "Bill, no one questions your intentions. But coming so soon after the quarterly forecast adjustments, and with the Microsoft negotiations at a critical stage, the timing raises concerns about your focus." "My focus?" Bill's voice remained calm but took on an edge. "Harrison Enterprises has seen record profits for 12 consecutive quarters under my leadership. The Microsoft deal is proceeding exactly as planned. My personal life has never interfered with my business judgment, and it won't start now." "And Rebecca?" Richard asked smoothly. "I understand she has reservations about this sudden adoption plan." Bill realized Richard had been in closer contact with Rebecca than he'd thought. "My marriage is not the board's concern. It becomes our concern," said Howard Steinberg, another board member, "when personal turmoil might affect company stability." "Harrison stock dipped 2 points this morning on rumors of discord in your household. Rumors that I suspect were carefully planted," Bill replied, looking directly at Richard. "Gentlemen, ladies, let's be honest about what's happening here. My cousin sees an opportunity to question my leadership based on a private matter. This isn't about corporate governance, it's about ambition." Richard's expression hardened. "That's an offensive accusation, Bill. We're expressing legitimate concerns about your judgment." "Then let's put it to a vote," Bill challenged. "If the board lacks confidence in my leadership, say so officially." A tense silence fell over the room. Richard had clearly been hoping to build momentum gradually, not force a confrontation today. Elaine spoke again. "No one is suggesting a vote of no confidence, Bill. We are simply asking for reassurance that this personal matter won't become a distraction." Bill stood, buttoning his suit jacket in a deliberate gesture of conclusion. "My personal and professional lives have always been separate. That won't change. Now, if there's actual company business to discuss, I'm happy to continue. Otherwise, I have a meeting with Child Protective Services that takes precedence over boardroom politics." As he walked out, Bill could feel Richard's glare boring into his back. The battle lines were drawn, and Richard had shown his hand earlier than Bill had anticipated. The question now was how far his cousin was willing to go to wrest control of Harrison Enterprises, and whether Sophie would become collateral damage in the process. Bill's phone buzzed with a text from Martha. "Sophie asking when you'll be home. She made something for you in art therapy today." Despite the tension of the board meeting, Bill found himself smiling at the message. For the first time in years, someone was waiting for him at home. Someone who didn't care about stock prices or corporate strategies. Someone who just wanted to show him a crayon drawing. Whatever storm Richard was brewing, Bill would weather it. He had found something worth fighting for. The Harrison penthouse had undergone a subtle transformation in the week since Sophie's arrival. Toys now occupied a corner of the pristine living room. Colorful drawings were magneted to the refrigerator door. A pair of small purple sneakers sat by the entrance, a stark contrast to Rebecca's designer heels and Bill's Italian loafers. Rebecca observed these changes with growing unease as she packed an overnight bag. She had been spending most nights at their Hamptons house, returning to the penthouse only to collect more belongings or for appearances at necessary social functions. Today, however, she had returned with a purpose. "Mother and father are expecting us for dinner tonight," she announced, finding Bill in his home office reviewing documents. "I've told them we'll be there at 7. Bill looked up in surprise. "Rebecca, I can't. Michael Jenkins is coming for Sophie's 3rd home evaluation. Reschedule it." Her tone left no room for negotiation. "My father has invited the governor. Your absence would be noticed." "I'm sorry, but Sophie needs stability right now. These evaluations are crucial for the guardianship application." Rebecca's carefully maintained composure slipped. "You're choosing that child over obligations to my family? Again? This isn't about choosing. It is exactly about choosing," she interrupted. "Ever since you brought her here, everything has been about Sophie. Sophie's needs, Sophie's schedule, Sophie's feelings. What about our life, Bill? What about the commitments we've made?" Bill set down his pen and gave her his full attention. "Rebecca, I understand this is difficult." "No, you don't understand," she said, her voice rising. "My father called me yesterday. He's heard rumors, Bill. The entire board knows about your project. People are talking. Sophie is not a project. Whatever she is, she's destroying everything we've built. My mother can barely look me in the eye at the club. Do you have any idea what it's like to be pitied by women I've known my entire life?" Bill studied his wife, this beautiful, polished woman who had once captivated him with her sharp mind and ambition. Somewhere along the way they had lost each other. Perhaps they had never truly found each other to begin with. "I'm sorry for any embarrassment this has caused you," he said carefully, "but I'm not changing my mind about Sophie." Rebecca's laugh was brittle. "The great William Harrison, stubborn to the end. Well, I've made a decision too. I'm meeting with divorce attorneys tomorrow." Though he had been expecting this, the finality of her words still landed like a physical blow. 15 years of marriage, ending not with a bang, but with a schedule conflict. "If that's what you want," he said quietly. "What I want?" Rebecca's composure cracked further. "What I wanted was a husband who prioritized our family. What I wanted was the life we planned together." "The life we planned died with Emma," Bill said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Rebecca flinched as if he'd struck her. Don't you dare use her to justify this midlife crisis or whatever it is. This isn't a crisis, Rebecca. It's the first clear decision I've made in years." She studied him, her eyes suddenly glistening with unshed tears. "You know what the worst part is? I don't even recognize you anymore. The Bill Harrison I married would never risk everything for sentimentality. Maybe that's the problem," he replied softly. "Maybe that Bill Harrison wasn't someone worth being." A small noise from the doorway drew their attention. Sophie stood there, her small face carefully blank, but her knuckles white where she gripped the doorframe. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Martha said to tell you Mr. Jenkins is here early." Rebecca quickly composed herself, wiping away any trace of emotion. "I'll be at my parents'. Don't bother calling." As she brushed past Sophie without acknowledgement, Bill watched his marriage dissolve in real time. The strange thing was how little pain he felt, only a dull ache for what might have been, and relief that the pretense was finally over. "Is she mad because of me?" Sophie asked after Rebecca had gone. Bill knelt to her level. "No, Sophie. Mrs. Harrison and I have had problems for a long time. This isn't your fault." Sophie didn't look convinced. "My last foster mum said I break families, that I'm bad luck." "You are not bad luck," Bill said firmly. "You're a brave, kind girl who deserves a good home, and I'm going to make sure you have one no matter what." Sophie's eyes searched his face, looking for deception or uncertainty. Finding none, she gave a small nod. "Mr. Jenkins has a lot of papers today. He said they're important." Bill managed a smile. "Then we'd better not keep him waiting, should we?" In the living room, Michael Jenkins had set up his usual array of forms and folders on the coffee table. Over the past week, Bill had come to respect the young social worker's thoroughness and genuine concern for Sophie's welfare. "Mr. Harrison," Jenkins greeted him, "I was just explaining to Sophie that today we need to talk about school options." Bill sat beside Sophie on the sofa. "We've researched several private institutions with strong support services for children who've experienced trauma." Jenkins nodded. "That's good, but I'll need to evaluate them for suitability. Also, we should discuss the domestic situation. I couldn't help but notice Mrs. Harrison seems absent." Bill chose his words carefully, aware of Sophie listening. My wife and I are separating. We've been headed in different directions for some time. Jenkins made a note, his expression neutral. And how do you anticipate this affecting your ability to provide stability for Sophie? If anything, it will simplify matters. Rebecca was not enthusiastic about the guardianship application. I see. Jenkins turned to Sophie. Sophie, would you mind if Martha showed you those new books we talked about? I need to speak with Mr. Harrison privately for a few minutes. Sophie glanced at Bill, who nodded encouragingly. After she left with Martha, Jenkins's professional demeanor softened slightly. Mr. Harrison, I want to be direct. Your application is facing significant challenges. An ongoing divorce, your high-profile position, the unusual circumstances of meeting Sophie. These all raise concerns with the placement committee. Bill felt his stomach tighten. What are you saying? I'm saying that despite your resources and obvious commitment, the committee is leaning toward placing Sophie in a more traditional foster environment once her case is processed. Traditional? Bill couldn't keep the edge from his voice. You mean like the last place, where she was locked in closets as punishment? Or the one before that, where she went hungry while the foster parents collected checks? Jenkins sighed. I understand your frustration, but the system prioritizes established two-parent households with proven... The system failed her, Bill interrupted. Multiple times, and now you're telling me that same system might take her away from the first stable environment she's known in years because I don't check all the right boxes. It's not that simple. It is that simple for Sophie, Bill insisted. She's finally feeling safe. She's starting to trust that adults might actually keep their promises. Do you know what it would do to her to be uprooted again? Jenkins removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture Bill had come to recognize as a sign the social worker was conflicted. Off the record, Mr. Harrison, I agree with you. In the week I've been observing Sophie here, I've seen remarkable progress. She's opening up, engaging more, showing fewer anxiety behaviors. The transformation is honestly impressive. Then help me, Bill urged. Tell the committee what you've seen. Make them understand that stability isn't about paperwork or conventional family structures. It's about providing a child with safety, consistency, and care. Jenkins replaced his glasses. I'll advocate for you, Mr. Harrison, but you should prepare for the possibility that it won't be enough. The system can be rigid. So can I, Bill said grimly. I won't give up on Sophie, whatever it takes. After Jenkins left, Bill found Sophie in the library, carefully examining a globe with Martha. This is where we are, Martha was explaining, pointing to New York. And this is where I was born, in Ireland. Sophie traced her finger across the Atlantic Ocean. That's really far. It is indeed, Martha agreed. But home isn't always about where you were born. Sometimes it's about where you find people who care about you. Bill smiled at Martha's wisdom as he joined them. How was your talk with Mr. Jenkins? Sophie shrugged. Okay, he asks a lot of questions. That's his job, to make sure you're in the right place. Sophie spun the globe slowly. Is this the right place for me? The uncertainty in her voice tore at Bill's heart. I think it is. What do you think? Sophie was quiet for a moment, still spinning the globe. I like it here. I like Martha and Frank. I like my room. And she hesitated, then added softly, I like you. Bill felt a surge of emotion that nearly overwhelmed him. I like you too, Sophie, very much. She looked up at him then, her blue eyes serious. Are they going to make me leave? The directness of the question caught Bill off guard. He considered giving her a comforting lie, but something told him Sophie had heard enough lies in her young life. Some people think you might be better off somewhere else, he said carefully. But I don't agree, and I promise you I'm doing everything I can to make sure you can stay here, if that's what you want. Sophie nodded, accepting his honesty. I want to stay. Then that's what matters, Bill said, with more confidence than he felt. Now, how about we look at those school brochures? You get to have a say in this decision too. Later that evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, Bill sat in his study with a glass of scotch, contemplating the challenges ahead. Richard was undoubtedly behind the concerns the placement committee had suddenly developed. His cousin was nothing if not thorough in his attacks. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Martha stood in the doorway, her kind face troubled. Mr. Harrison, there's a Ms. Carter here to see you. A reporter. She's quite insistent. Bill frowned. A reporter? At this hour? She says it's regarding Mr. Montgomery and Sophie. She believes you'll want to hear what she has to say. Bill's instinct was to refuse. He'd had enough of journalists and their invasive questions over the years, but the mention of Richard and Sophie in the same breath set off alarm bells. "Show her in, please, Martha." Jessica Carter was not what Bill expected. Rather than the aggressive tabloid hound he'd anticipated, she was composed and professional, declining his offer of a drink with a polite shake of her head. "Mr. Harrison, thank you for seeing me. I know it's unorthodox to show up at someone's home like this, but what I've discovered couldn't wait." "Discovered about what, exactly?" Jessica placed a digital recorder on the table between them. "Your cousin offered me $50,000 to write a hit piece about you, about your mental stability, your fitness to run Harrison Enterprises, and specifically about your decision to take in Sophie Wells." Bill's expression darkened. "That sounds like Richard." "I didn't take his money, Mr. Harrison. That's not how I work. But I did start investigating, not you, but him, and what I found was concerning." She pressed play on the recorder. Richard's voice filled the room. "The girl is our leverage. Carter's piece will raise enough concerns that Child Services will have to remove her. Once that happens, Bill will spiral. He's already emotionally compromised. The board will have no choice but to act. By this time next month, I'll be CEO and you'll be rewarded for your loyalty." Jessica stopped the recording. "That was a conversation between your cousin and Howard Steinberg, recorded yesterday at the Yale Club." Bill sat back, processing this information. "How did you get this?" "I have sources and ethics, which is why I'm here instead of rushing this to print. Mr. Harrison, your cousin isn't just after your company. He's weaponizing a child's well-being to get it." Bill's hand tightened around his glass. "And what do you want in exchange for this information?" Jessica met his gaze directly. "The truth, an exclusive on the real story, not Richard's version, not the society gossip, but what's actually happening. Why a billionaire CEO suddenly decided to become a foster parent to a homeless child. The human story, not the corporate angle." Bill studied her carefully. "And if I refuse, then I keep investigating anyway. I've already started digging into Sophie's previous foster placements. There are serious inconsistencies in the records, Mr. Harrison. Missing reports, overlooked abuse allegations. Someone was negligent, possibly criminally so. That story will come out with or without your cooperation." Bill was silent for a long moment. "Sophie's been through enough without becoming tabloid fodder." "I agree," Jessica said simply. "That's why I want to get it right. Tell your side. Help me understand what's really happening here, and I promise I'll report it fairly." Bill considered his options. Jessica Carter had a reputation for tough but ethical reporting. If Richard was already moving against Sophie through the placement committee, having the truth in the public domain might actually help their case. "One condition," he finally said. "Sophie's privacy is paramount. No photographs, no interviews with her. Nothing that would make her identifiable to anyone from her past." Jessica nodded without hesitation. "Agreed. This isn't about exploiting a child. It's about exposing the adults who failed her, including me, if that's where your investigation leads." "Including anyone," she confirmed. "I follow the facts, Mr. Harrison. Nothing more, nothing less." Bill extended his hand. "Then we have a deal, Ms. Carter. But understand this, Sophie's welfare comes first. Before my company, before my reputation, before anything. If your reporting jeopardizes her in any way, our arrangement ends." Jessica shook his hand firmly. "I understand. We'll start tomorrow. And Mr. Harrison, for what it's worth, what you're doing for that little girl, it matters." After she left, Bill remained in his study, staring at the ceiling. The stakes had just risen exponentially. Richard wasn't just after his company now. He was actively working to separate Bill from Sophie, using the child as a pawn in his corporate chess game. The thought filled Bill with a cold fury he hadn't felt in years. Richard had always been ambitious, always jealous of Bill's success. But this crossed a line. Using a vulnerable child as leverage was beyond contempt. Bill moved to the window, looking out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. He had built an empire from nothing, overcome countless business challenges, outmaneuvered the shrewdest competitors. But this fight was different. This wasn't about market share or profit margins. It was about a small girl who had already endured more trauma than most adults. For the first time in his career, William Harrison was fighting not for success, but for family, and he would not lose. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of legal meetings, home evaluations, and increasingly aggressive moves from Richard. Bill found himself fighting a war on two fronts: in the boardroom, where Richard was methodically turning directors against him, and in family court, where the guardianship proceedings had stalled amid concerns about the home environment. Through it all, Sophie continued to blossom, seemingly oblivious to the battles being waged around her. Her nightmares had become less frequent. She had started at Bradford Academy, an exclusive private school with an excellent support program for children who had experienced trauma. Her teacher reported that despite academic gaps from her unstable education history, Sophie showed remarkable intelligence and determination. One evening, Bill returned home to find Sophie and Martha at the dining table, surrounded by art supplies. Sophie was carefully cutting shapes from colored paper, while Martha supervised. "What's all this?" Bill asked, setting down his briefcase. Sophie looked up with unusual animation. "It's for the Heritage Day project at school. We have to make a family tree." Bill felt a pang, seeing the simple tree outline Sophie had drawn with just 3 figures: herself, Bill, and Martha, while her classmates would have extensive family connections to display. "It's beautiful," he said, meaning it. Sophie bit her lip. "Miss Preston said families come in all shapes and sizes, that some are made, not just born." "Miss Preston sounds very wise," Bill replied, sitting beside her. "Family is about who loves you, not just who's related to you." Sophie nodded seriously. "That's what I think too." She hesitated, then added, "I put Frank on the back, and Mr. Jenkins. He's not family, but he visits a lot." Bill smiled. "He certainly does." Martha discreetly excused herself, leaving them alone. Sophie continued cutting shapes in concentrated silence before suddenly asking, "Is Mrs. Harrison still your family?" The question caught Bill off guard. Rebecca had been increasingly absent, spending most of her time at their Hamptons house and communicating with Bill only through lawyers. "That's complicated, Sophie. Sometimes adults who once made a family together decide they need to go separate ways." "Because of me?" The directness of her question broke his heart. "No," Bill said firmly. "Absolutely not because of you. Mrs. Harrison and I had problems long before you came to live with us." Sophie seemed to accept this. "At my old school, Zach Miller had 2 houses, one with his mom and one with his dad. He said it was okay because he got double birthday presents." Bill smiled at her pragmatism. "Is that something you'd be worried about? Having 2 homes?" Sophie shook her head. "I like it here, just here." She looked down at her project, then asked in a smaller voice, "What happens if the judge says I can't stay?" The question hit Bill like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on fighting that he hadn't realized how much Sophie understood about her uncertain situation. "Sophie, look at me," he said gently. When she raised her eyes to his, he continued, "I promise you, I will do everything in my power to make sure you stay right here where you belong. But what if it's not enough?" The wisdom in her young eyes was almost unbearable. Bill chose his words carefully. "Then we keep fighting, together. I won't give up on you, Sophie, not ever." She studied him with that intense gaze that seemed to see right through adult pretenses. Whatever she found in his expression must have reassured her, because she nodded once decisively and returned to her project. Later that night, after Sophie was asleep, Bill sat with Sarah Pearson in his study, reviewing their legal strategy. "The placement hearing is scheduled for next Monday," Sarah explained. "Michael Jenkins' report is mixed. He acknowledges Sophie's progress with you, but expresses concern about the ongoing domestic discord and high-profile corporate conflict." "Richard's fingerprints are all over this," Bill said grimly. Sarah nodded. "Almost certainly. The timing of these concerns is too convenient. However, we do have one potential advantage. Jessica Carter's article is scheduled to run in Sunday's edition of the New York Times." Bill had been working with Jessica for the past 2 weeks, providing her with access to documents, interviews, and the full, unvarnished truth about his relationship with Sophie. She had been thorough, professional, and surprisingly empathetic. "Will it be enough?" he asked. Sarah's expression was carefully neutral. "It depends on the judge. Eleanor Simmons is known for being by the book, but she also has a reputation for putting children's welfare above procedural concerns. If Jessica's article convincingly demonstrates that Sophie is thriving in your care, it could sway the court's opinion." And what about Richard's efforts to paint me as unstable? That's where things get interesting, Sarah said, opening her laptop. Jessica's investigation uncovered something unexpected. Take a look at this. She pulled up a series of documents, financial reports, transfer records, and emails. Bill studied them with growing disbelief. Richard has been systematically diverting company resources to shell corporations for the past 3 years, Sarah explained. Small amounts carefully hidden in legitimate transactions. But when you add it all up, $15 million, Bill finished, scanning the bottom line. How did our auditors miss this? Because the transactions were authorized under your electronic signature. Richard apparently found a way to access your authorization codes. Bill sat back, processing this revelation. So while he's been positioning himself as the responsible steward of the company, he's been embezzling millions. Exactly. Jessica has the full documentation. It will be part of her story on Sunday. For the first time in weeks, Bill felt a glimmer of hope. This changes everything. The board can't possibly support Richard once this comes to light. Don't underestimate him, Sarah cautioned. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. Richard still has the placement hearing as leverage. If he can convince the court to remove Sophie from your care, he'll use your emotional reaction to bolster his claims about your stability. Bill's jaw tightened. He's using a child as a pawn in a corporate power play. How did I not see who he really was all these years? Family can blind us, Sarah said quietly. The question now is how we proceed. The embezzlement evidence gives us leverage, but using it means a very public scandal for Harrison Enterprises. Bill didn't hesitate. Sophie comes first. The company can weather a scandal. She can't weather another trauma. The day of Jessica's article dawned clear and cold. Bill sat at his kitchen counter, digital edition of the New York Times open on his tablet. The headline stared back at him. The girl who found a father. How an orphaned child transformed a billionaire's life and became the center of a corporate power struggle. The article was masterful, thorough, balanced, and deeply human. Jessica had traced Sophie's journey through a broken foster care system, documenting the institutional failures that had allowed her abuse to continue unchecked. She detailed Bill's chance encounter with Sophie and the immediate bond that had formed between them. Most powerfully, she included testimony from Sophie's teachers, from Michael Jenkins and from Martha, about the remarkable transformation they had witnessed in the child. The corporate angle was handled with equal skill. Jessica laid out Richard's systematic campaign to undermine Bill, including the damning evidence of financial misconduct. She quoted board members who now expressed regret at having been manipulated by Richard's machinations. But the heart of the story was the relationship between Bill and Sophie, how they had healed each other, how they had become a family against all odds. The final paragraph struck Bill particularly hard. In a society that often measures success in dollars and stock prices, William Harrison had achieved it all, yet by his own admission, he had lost himself in the process. After my daughter Emma passed, I became a ghost in my own life, Harrison told me. I was going through the motions, building wealth but not meaning. Sophie Wells, a child discarded by a system meant to protect her, didn't need Harrison's wealth. She needed what every child needs: safety, stability, and love. In providing these essentials to Sophie, Harrison found something money can't buy: purpose. Tomorrow, a family court judge will decide whether this unconventional family can remain together. Whatever the outcome, both Harrison and Sophie have already demonstrated a profound truth. Family isn't defined by blood or legal documents, but by the choice to belong to each other. Bill was still absorbing the article when his phone rang. It was Elaine Donovan from the board. Bill, I've just read the Times piece. I owe you an apology. We all do. Richard's actions are inexcusable. Thank you, Elaine. I appreciate that. The board is calling an emergency session this afternoon. Richard has been temporarily suspended pending investigation. We'd like you there if you can make it. I'll be there, Bill promised. As he ended the call, he heard a small voice from the doorway. Is everything okay, Mr. Bill? Sophie stood there in her school uniform, backpack already on, hair neatly braided by Martha's skilled hands. The sight of her, so much healthier and more confident than the frightened child he'd found on the street, filled Bill with a fierce, protective love. Everything's fine, Sophie. Better than fine, actually. She studied him with those two perceptive eyes. You look happy. I am happy because of you. Sophie processed this with characteristic seriousness. Martha says I have to wear my best dress to court tomorrow. She says the judge needs to see I'm a proper young lady now. Bill smiled. Martha's very wise. Will Mrs. Harrison be there? The question surprised him. I don't know, Sophie. Why do you ask? Sophie shrugged, adjusting her backpack straps. Just wondering. She left because of me. Maybe the judge should know that. Sophie, listen to me, Bill said, kneeling to her level. Mrs. Harrison left because she and I want different things from life. That's not your fault. Never think it is. Sophie didn't look entirely convinced. If I go away, would she come back? The innocence of the question broke his heart. Is that what you think should happen? Sophie considered this seriously. No, she finally said. I think you were sad before, both of you. Now you're just a different kind of sad, but sometimes you smile real smiles. I never saw her do that. The wisdom of children, Bill thought. Out of the mouths of babes comes truth that adults spend lifetimes avoiding. Time for school, Martha announced, appearing in the doorway. Mr. Jenkins will pick you up at 3 for your final interview, Sophie. Remember what we practiced? Sophie nodded solemnly. Just tell the truth. Don't try to guess what grown-ups want to hear. That's right, Bill agreed. Just be yourself. That's more than enough. After Sophie left for school, Bill prepared for the board meeting. Richard would be desperate now, cornered and dangerous as Sarah had predicted. But for the first time since this ordeal began, Bill felt confident. The truth was out there now for everyone to see. The Harrison Enterprises boardroom was tense when Bill arrived. Richard was already seated, his usual smooth confidence replaced by barely contained fury. The other board members avoided his gaze, focusing instead on the copies of Jessica's article placed at each seat. Elaine called the meeting to order. In light of the serious allegations published today, the board has called this emergency session to address concerns about the financial management of Harrison Enterprises and the leadership of this company moving forward. Richard stood. These allegations are fabricated, a desperate attempt by my cousin to distract from his own increasingly erratic behavior. Howard Steinberg, once Richard's ally, spoke up. The financial records appear authentic, Richard. Are you claiming they're forgeries? I'm claiming they're being misinterpreted, Richard insisted. Every transaction had legitimate business purposes. Through shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands, another board member asked skeptically. As the questioning intensified, Richard's composure began to crack. This is a witch hunt. Bill brings some street urchin into his home, starts making irrational decisions, and I'm the one being investigated? The crude reference to Sophie silenced the room. Bill rose slowly, his voice deadly calm. That street urchin has a name. Sophie Wells. She's 8 years old. She's learning to play chess. Her favorite subject is science. She has nightmares about being locked in closets by people who were supposed to protect her. And she matters, Richard, not as leverage in your pathetic grab for power, but as a human being who deserves better than what life has given her so far. Richard's face contorted with rage. You've lost your mind. All of this, the girl, the guardianship. It's because you couldn't protect Emma. You couldn't save your own daughter. So now you're trying to save this random child as some kind of redemption project. The mention of Emma's name hit Bill like a physical blow, but he refused to let Richard see the impact. You never understood, Richard. Not about Emma, not about business, and certainly not about family. That's why you'll never run this company. We'll see about that tomorrow, won't we? Richard sneered. When the judge sends your pet project back to foster care where she belongs, how stable will you be then, cousin? Bill stepped closer, his voice lowered so only Richard could hear. If Sophie is removed from my care because of your manipulations, I will dedicate every resource I have, every dollar, every connection, every minute of my time, to making sure you not only lose your position here, but face criminal charges for your financial misconduct. That's not a threat, Richard. It's a promise. The color drained from Richard's face as he recognized the implacable resolve in Bill's eyes. For the first time, doubt crept into his expression. Elaine's voice cut through the tension. I call for an immediate vote on the temporary suspension of Richard Montgomery, pending a full investigation of the financial allegations. The vote was unanimous, with Richard himself the only holdout. As security escorted him from the boardroom, he turned back to Bill with naked hatred in his eyes. This isn't over. Family court still decides tomorrow, and I have friends in very persuasive positions. After Richard was gone, Elaine approached Bill. "The board wants you to know we stand behind you, Bill, both as CEO and in your personal matter." "Thank you, Elaine. That means more than you know." As Bill left the building, his phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source. "Rebecca, we need to talk before tomorrow's hearing. Dinner at the Penthouse, 7 p.m. Bill stared at the message, trying to decipher her motivation. Was this another attack or something else entirely? Either way, he knew he had to hear what she had to say. Tomorrow's hearing would determine not just Sophie's future, but his own. The battle with Richard had been won, at least temporarily, but the war for Sophie was still hanging in the balance, with one crucial question remaining. What did Rebecca want, and how far was she willing to go to get it? Rebecca arrived precisely at 7, looking elegant as always in a simple black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Martha opened the door, her expression carefully neutral as she took Rebecca's coat. "Where is she?" Rebecca asked without preamble. "Sophie is having dinner with Frank in the kitchen," Martha replied. "Mr. Harrison thought it best." Rebecca nodded, betraying no emotion. "And Bill?" "In the dining room, waiting for you." The formal dining room, with its 20-foot ceilings and Central Park views, had hosted heads of state and captains of industry over the years. Tonight it held only Bill, sitting alone at the massive table with a single place setting across from him. "Rebecca," he acknowledged as she entered, "thank you for coming." "I read the article," she said, taking her seat. "Jessica Carter is thorough. I'll give her that." "She followed the evidence," Bill replied, pouring wine into Rebecca's glass, "as she always does." Rebecca took a sip, studying him over the rim. "Richard called me this afternoon. He was unhinged, ranting about betrayal and revenge. I've never heard him like that. Richard made his choices. Now he has to live with the consequences." "And what about my choices, Bill? Where do they fit in this new narrative you're creating?" Bill set down his glass. "That's why I agreed to this dinner, to hear what you want." Rebecca's perfect composure slipped just slightly. "What I want? You haven't asked me that in years." "I'm asking now." She was silent for a long moment. "I want not to be humiliated. The article portrayed me as a cold, status-obsessed socialite who couldn't accept a child in need. Is that portrayal inaccurate?" Bill asked quietly. Rebecca's eyes flashed. "You know nothing about what I felt. You never asked. You just brought that child home and expected me to instantly transform into a mother figure." "You're right," Bill admitted, surprising her. "I didn't consider your feelings. I acted on impulse for the first time in years, and I didn't stop to think how it would affect you." Rebecca hadn't expected this concession. She took another sip of wine, gathering her thoughts. "I'm not a monster, Bill. I don't wish harm on a child. But you have to understand. When I saw you with her, looking at her the way you used to look at Emma, it was like being erased. Like all those years of grief and healing meant nothing. That wasn't my intention." "Intentions rarely matter as much as actions," she replied. "You made a unilateral decision that transformed our lives without consulting me. After Emma, I couldn't do it again. I couldn't open myself to that kind of pain." For the first time, Bill began to truly see the situation from Rebecca's perspective. The fear beneath her coldness, the self-protection mistaken for callousness. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it. "I should have been more understanding of what you've been through, what we've both been through." Rebecca studied her hands. "The divorce papers are drawn up. My lawyer has them ready to file." "I know. But," she continued, surprising him, "I haven't signed them yet." Bill waited, sensing there was more. "The hearing tomorrow," Rebecca said carefully. "Judge Simmons will consider the home environment. A pending divorce won't help your case. What are you suggesting?" Rebecca met his eyes directly. "I'm suggesting that despite everything, I don't want to see you lose something that clearly matters to you so deeply." Again, Bill was stunned. "You would delay the divorce for Sophie's sake?" "For your sake," Rebecca clarified. "We had 15 years together, Bill. That counts for something even now." Before Bill could respond, the dining room door opened slightly, and Sophie's small face appeared in the gap. When she saw Rebecca, she froze. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Martha said to tell you I'm going to bed now." Bill gestured for her to come in. "It's all right, Sophie. Come say goodnight." Sophie entered hesitantly, her eyes never leaving Rebecca. She was wearing new pajamas, light blue with stars on them, and her hair was damp from her evening bath. "Hello, Mrs. Harrison," she said formally. Rebecca studied the child who had upended her carefully constructed life. In the weeks since she'd last seen Sophie, the transformation was remarkable. The frightened, malnourished girl had been replaced by a healthier, more confident child. Her hollow cheeks had filled out, and there was a steadiness in her gaze that hadn't been there before. "Hello, Sophie," Rebecca replied, her voice softer than Bill had expected. "Your pajamas are very pretty." Sophie glanced down as if surprised. "Martha got them for me. She says stars are good for dreaming." An awkward silence fell. Sophie shifted from foot to foot, then said, "Mr. Bill says you're going to court tomorrow." Rebecca nodded. "That's right. Are you going to tell the judge I should leave?" The directness of the question was pure Sophie. Rebecca seemed taken aback by the child's candor. "I haven't decided yet." Sophie absorbed this with a seriousness beyond her years. "If you want me to leave so you can come back, I understand. I've had to leave lots of places before." The simple dignity in her words struck both adults into silence. Here was a child preparing herself once again to be discarded for adult concerns beyond her control. Rebecca was the first to recover. "Sophie, my issues with Mr. Harrison have nothing to do with you." Sophie considered this. "That's what he says too. But grown-ups say lots of things that aren't really true to make kids feel better." Rebecca glanced at Bill, then back to Sophie. "That's a fair observation. I like it here," Sophie continued, her voice small but determined. "Mr. Bill helps me with homework. Martha tells me stories about Ireland. Frank taught me chess. I have my own toothbrush that nobody else uses, and I haven't had the closet dream in 6 days." "The closet dream?" Rebecca asked despite herself. "From my old house, when they'd lock me in if I was bad." Sophie said this matter-of-factly as if discussing the weather. "But Mr. Bill says nobody gets locked up here, even if they make mistakes." Rebecca's carefully composed expression faltered. She had read about Sophie's circumstances in Jessica's article, but hearing it stated so plainly by the child herself was different, more real, more devastating. "No," she said softly. "No one should ever be locked up for making mistakes." Sophie nodded, then turned to Bill. "Can I have my story now?" "Of course," Bill replied. "I'll be there in just a minute." After Sophie had gone, Rebecca sat in silence, staring at her wine glass. "She's remarkable," she finally said. "Yes," Bill agreed. "She is. And she loves you." Bill smiled slightly. "She's learning to. Trust comes slowly when you've been hurt as often as she has." Rebecca set down her glass decisively. "I'll be at the hearing tomorrow. I'll tell Judge Simmons that despite our personal differences, I support your guardianship application. It's the right thing for Sophie." Bill was stunned. "Rebecca, thank you." She stood, smoothing her dress. "Don't thank me yet. I'm still filing for divorce, Bill. Just not until after the hearing. Some endings can't be avoided, only postponed." As she collected her purse, she added, "The company too. I'll be selling my shares once things settle. I think we both need clean breaks to move forward." Bill nodded, understanding. "For what it's worth, I am sorry for how things turned out between us." "So am I," Rebecca said softly. "But perhaps this ending is better than continuing as we were. Two ghosts haunting the same mansion, afraid to truly live." After she left, Bill went to Sophie's room for their nightly story ritual. She was already in bed, her stuffed elephant, a gift from Martha, clutched against her chest. "Did Mrs. Harrison leave?" she asked as Bill sat on the edge of her bed. "Yes, but she'll be at court tomorrow to help us." Sophie's eyes widened in surprise. "Really, why?" Bill considered how to explain the complexities of adult relationships to an 8-year-old. "Sometimes people can care about what happens to others even if they don't want to live with them. Mrs. Harrison wants you to be happy and safe, even if that's not with her." Sophie thought about this. "That's kind of nice, I guess." "It is," Bill agreed. "Now, where were we in our story?" "Chapter 7, Sophie reminded him, where Dorothy meets the wizard. As Bill read from The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, Sophie's favorite, he found himself thinking about tomorrow's hearing, the final hurdle in their journey to become a family. Whatever happened, they had already changed each other in ways neither could have imagined that snowy night on Fifth Avenue. The family courtroom was nothing like the corporate boardrooms where Bill typically held sway. The wood paneling was worn, the chairs utilitarian. the atmosphere somber rather than imposing. Sophie sat between Bill and Sarah, wearing the navy blue dress Martha had carefully selected, and her hair tied back with a matching ribbon. Judge Eleanor Simmons was a formidable woman in her 60s, with steel-grey hair and piercing eyes that had witnessed decades of family trauma. She began by addressing the adults in the room. "This is an unusual case," she noted, reviewing the file before her. "Mr. Harrison, while your resources are certainly abundant, there are legitimate concerns about the stability of the home environment and the circumstances of your initial encounter with Sophie." Sarah began to respond, but Judge Simmons held up her hand. "I've read Ms. Pearson's excellent brief. I've also read Ms. Carter's article, though I put more stock in Mr. Jenkins' reports than newspaper accounts, however well researched." She turned her attention to Sophie. "Young lady, would you mind speaking with me privately in my chambers?" Sophie looked at Bill, who nodded encouragingly. "It's okay, just tell the truth like we talked about." As Sophie followed the judge into her chambers, Rebecca slipped into the courtroom, taking a seat in the row behind Bill. He turned, surprised despite her promise. "I said I would be here," she said simply. Michael Jenkins was called to testify first, detailing his observations over the past month. "While the circumstances are unorthodox," he concluded, "I've observed genuine attachment forming between Mr. Harrison and Sophie. She's showing remarkable progress in terms of security, trust, and emotional regulation." "And the concerns about Mr. Harrison's motivations?" Judge Simmons asked. "The suggestion that he's seeking to replace his deceased daughter." Jenkins chose his words carefully. "Grief can certainly complicate motivations, but in my professional opinion, Mr. Harrison recognizes Sophie as her own person, not a replacement for his loss. He's committed to her specific needs and welfare." Rebecca was called next, surprising everyone, including Sarah. "Mrs. Harrison," Judge Simmons began, "you've been largely absent during this process. Why appear now?" Rebecca's composure was perfect as always. "Your Honor, my husband and I have had our differences. We're in the process of separating. But on the matter of Sophie Wells, I want to be clear. Bill is an excellent father. He always was, even before—" Her voice caught slightly, the first public acknowledgement of Emma that Bill had heard from her in years. "Sophie deserves stability," Rebecca continued. "She's found that with Bill. Whatever our personal issues, I fully support his guardianship application." When Sophie returned from the judge's chambers, her small face was serious but calm. She resumed her seat beside Bill, who resisted the urge to ask what they had discussed. After hearing testimony from Sophie's teacher and reviewing reports from her therapist, Judge Simmons called a brief recess. The tension in the courtroom was palpable when she returned, her expression unreadable. "Guardianship applications are among the most consequential decisions this court makes," she began. "We are determining not just legal arrangements, but a child's entire future. The stability, safety, and emotional well-being of the child must be our paramount concern." Bill reached for Sophie's hand, finding it already reaching for his. "In the case of Sophie Wells," Judge Simmons continued, "I've heard compelling testimony about her progress in Mr. Harrison's care. I've also heard legitimate concerns about the unconventional circumstances and ongoing family dynamics." She looked directly at Sophie. "Young lady, in my chambers you told me something I found quite profound. Would you mind repeating it for everyone here?" Sophie sat up straighter, her voice small but clear in the hushed courtroom. "I said that Mr. Bill is the first grown-up who made a promise and then kept it. He promised I wouldn't have to be hungry or scared anymore, and I'm not. He promised nobody would lock me up, and nobody has. He promised I could stay if I wanted to, and I do want to. Very much." Judge Simmons nodded. "Thank you, Sophie." Turning back to the courtroom, she continued, "The law provides a framework, but within that framework we must sometimes recognize exceptional circumstances. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, I find that despite the unconventional nature of this case, the best interests of Sophie Wells are clearly served by remaining in the care of William Harrison." Bill felt Sophie's hand tighten in his as the judge's words registered. "Therefore, I am granting the petition for permanent guardianship, with quarterly check-ins from Mr. Jenkins for the first year. Congratulations, Mr. Harrison. And Sophie, I think you've found your home." The formality of the courtroom prevented any outward celebration, but Bill felt Sophie lean against him slightly. For her, an unprecedented display of emotion in public. Outside the courthouse, under a bright October sky, Sophie finally allowed herself a small smile. "So I can stay? Forever?" "Forever," Bill confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "We're a family now, officially." Martha and Frank were waiting by the car, their faces breaking into wide smiles at Bill's thumbs up. As Sophie ran to share the news with them, Bill turned to find Rebecca watching from a few steps away. "Thank you," he said simply. "Your testimony made a difference." Rebecca nodded. "I meant what I said. You are a good father." After a pause, she added, "The divorce papers will be delivered tomorrow. I've been more than fair with the settlement terms." "I never doubted you would be." She glanced at Sophie, now chatting animatedly with Martha. "She'll need a mother figure eventually, you know, someone to guide her through things you can't understand." "One step at a time," Bill replied. "For now, we're still learning how to be a family." Rebecca's smile was tinged with something like regret. "You already are a family, Bill. I can see that now." She leaned in and kissed his cheek softly. "Goodbye." As she walked away, Sophie returned to Bill's side. "Is Mrs. Harrison leaving?" "Yes, she has her own path now, just like we have ours." Sophie considered this. "Are you sad?" Bill looked down at this remarkable child who had transformed his life in just a few short weeks. "No," he said truthfully. "Not anymore." 6 months later, on a perfect spring day, Bill stood in Central Park watching Sophie feed ducks at the pond. At 9 years old, her birthday celebrated with her first ever proper party the month before, she had blossomed into a different child from the one he'd found huddled in a doorway. Her nightmares were rare now. She excelled at school, particularly in science and art. She had made friends, including, ironically, the daughter of a board member who had initially been skeptical of Bill's guardianship. The corporate storm had settled as well. Richard had resigned rather than face a public investigation, moving to Europe with his portion of the family money. Harrison Enterprises had emerged stronger, with Bill's leadership unquestioned, and a new corporate philanthropy division dedicated to improving the foster care system. Jessica Carter approached, notepad in hand. "Right on time, Mr. Harrison. Thank you for agreeing to this follow-up interview." Bill smiled. "After everything you did to help us, it's the least I could do." They sat on a bench overlooking the pond as Jessica asked about the changes in their lives since the court hearing. "The biggest change?" Bill considered the question. "Perspective, I think. Before Sophie, success meant acquisition. More money, more power, more control. Now it means seeing her laugh without looking over her shoulder first. It means watching her raise her hand in class without fear of being wrong. It means knowing she doesn't hide food in her pockets anymore because she trusts there will always be enough." "And Harrison Enterprises? Has your leadership style changed?" Bill nodded. "We've implemented a comprehensive parental leave policy, flexible scheduling for parents, an on-site childcare center. Small things maybe, but they matter to families. And your personal life. I understand Rebecca's divorce became final last month." "Yes, we're both moving forward. She's in Paris now, I believe, starting fresh." Jessica made a note. "And you? Any romance on the horizon for America's most eligible guardian?" Bill laughed. Sophie's teacher made a similar joke at parent-teacher night. "The answer is no. For now, my focus is where it should be, on giving Sophie the childhood she deserves." As if summoned by her name, Sophie ran over, duck feathers sticking to her jeans. "Mr. Bill, can we get ice cream? Frank says there's a cart by the boathouse." Bill checked his watch. "I don't see why not. Would you like to join us, Miss Carter?" Jessica smiled, closing her notebook. "Actually, I think I have everything I need for my story. The Billionaire and the Orphan 6 months later." Sophie wrinkled her nose. "That's a boring title." "Oh?" Jessica raised an eyebrow. "What would you suggest?" Sophie thought for a moment, then declared with absolute certainty, "How about The Girl Who Found Her Forever Home?" Bill felt his throat tighten as Jessica nodded approvingly. "That's much better. I think we'll go with that." As they walked toward the ice cream cart, Sophie's small hand slipped naturally into Bill's, a gesture that once would have been unthinkable for a child so wary of adult touch. "Mr. Bill," she asked, "do I have to keep calling you that, now that it's forever?" Bill looked down at her, surprised. "What would you prefer to call me?" Sophie kicked at a pebble on the path, suddenly shy. Well, at school, when they ask about my dad, I say that's you. Is that okay? Bill knelt down to her level, not caring about the dirt on his designer suit. Sophie, nothing would make me prouder than to be your dad. But only if that's what you want, she nodded, her blue eyes serious as always. I do. I want a real dad. You. Then that's what I am, he said simply. Your dad. Forever. Sophie considered this, then nodded with satisfaction. Forever is a good word. Better than until. Much better, Bill agreed, standing and taking her hand again. As they walked through the dappled sunlight of Central Park, the billionaire and the orphan, now father and daughter, Bill Harrison reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought them together. From a chance encounter on a snowy street to a family court ruling to this perfect spring day, they had found in each other what both had been missing, someone to belong to, completely and without reservation. Family, Bill had learned, wasn't built on shared DNA or legal documents, but on choices made daily, the choice to protect, to nurture, to love. And in choosing Sophie, he had finally found his way home.